So today I'm going to be talking about imago, which is from the fibus group. It's about the true potential of relationships. Conflict is growth trying to happen. When we think of something that's getting stuck, it's like, many people say it's like a suit that's too tight or a boundary that's a false edge. Actually, we can go further. And so there's a conflict of interest. There's both the version of us that's bigger and the version of us that doesn't want to be bigger. There's the version of us that wants to wear the suit that doesn't fit and the version of us that needs a suit that does fit. So imago is all about the true potential of relationships. And there's 3 stages that I'm going to talk about. Specifically, imago therapy is, like I said, it's very famous, but it was started with the fibus group. So, or at least that's where I got my information. So when we're attracted to potential love partner, which is where we experience the most conflict of interest, because there's a self and other, and we allow this other to become closer and closer. And this is the basis of the child's relationship. The relationship with the child is based on the relationship with the co-parent or the lover. So even though the partnership may not actually have a physical child, the relationship itself is a child. So when we're attracted to a potential love partner, when I use the word potential here, it means that we are attracted to potential, which means that there's something there that is growth, right? Because it's going to be more than one. You have a positive charge and negative charge. Now you have a circuitry. When you just have a charge that's one side or the other, there's not a growth happening because there's no circuitry. You need both. So we're actually picking the perfect person to help us work through the wounds of our childhood. Not to be everything we always thought we wanted and needed and excitement, but actually somebody who's going to help us to heal in some way that conflict of interest that we're trying to be two. We're trying to be the bigger and the smaller. So we no longer have to be the smaller because the wounds of our childhood kept us from growing bigger. We even grow personalities and characters around the wounds. So caretaking traits, which is the combined negative and positive, which is called the imago, which is both the negative and the positive, like I mentioned, it becomes like a love script. It's like a play, it's like roles, it's there's so many words for this, but really the experience is that we become both the version of the other person that we think needs caretaking for them, but also we need caretaking. So there's like a bigger and smaller that are starting to come into relationship inside of ourselves. And there's 3 stages. The first is romantic love stage, which is like falling in love. Then and it's called falling, right? Then there's the power struggle. This is where we learn how to stand in love. And then conscious relationship, which is where we are in love. So the first, romantic love or falling in love, and this can happen with anything that we sort of create outside of ourselves as more positive, and where the more negative, we need that or we want it. And even if somebody pretends and they cover it up with like, I don't care in this, it's still like an inside out. It's still like, I refuse to allow myself to be the smaller person that I feel like, or I refuse to submit that I actually need. And this is like still not allowing one to be the negative. It can't be the positive. If someone's in an altered state of consciousness, but they're pretending that they're conscious, then it's clearly still a state of smallness, so or lesser. So in other words, called the negative, it doesn't mean that it's actually lesser. It just means it has the inversion. So there's a space inside to be received into, and that's what the positive charge can go into. And it doesn't mean masculine or feminine. It means imago here. So when we're in an altered state of consciousness, we deny the negative traits of the other and we magnify the positive. The purpose of this stage is that pretty much anyone, 2 people, incompatible, okay, become blinded long enough to make an intimate connection. And this is the purpose. This is the purpose. This is also like when you think about a mother, when she's first impregnated, and then when she actually has to give birth, she becomes blinded to what the birth would be like while she's being impregnated. So and this is like what condom commercials kind of like exploit the idea that if you knew what would come out of what you were doing, you may think before you do it about different things or in a different way. The number 2 stage, the power struggle, is where we mostly see the negatives. In fact, the very things that we thought made us fall in love become bad triggers, pushed every which way. And this can result in 1, a lack of connection, which is 2 parallel relationships. They're not merging. They're 2 relationships. The bigger and the bigger and smaller are not connecting. And then we have or explosive hot relating cycle of fighting and reconciling, it's out of control. It's a struggle. It's like the admission that each one has positive and negative feels too threatening to the personal self of each one. And the other option is just to end the relationship. And this is where there's the refusal to be whole, to be positive and negative, to admit that each one has their own childhood wounds, or else they wouldn't be in the relationship at all. And each one is picking somebody who's perfect to help them. So there's a basic humility here, which is necessary in order to move from the power struggle into a conscious relationship. But before that, we might feel the defensiveness come up. Defending ourselves, when we are feeling comfortable with ourselves, there's no one to defend. It really doesn't matter. The other doesn't matter. When we have no other inside, anyone outside is not really other. It's like versions of us on the way. Oh yeah, I used to be like that, or I was like that one time. But then we might also, obviously with caretaking, we get overly involved in the relationship because the other person's in our space, could be in our bed, could be in our life. And their refusal to heal their wounds, or their refusal to see their own negativity and positivity, can be what we're defending ourselves from them trying to annihilate our wholeness because of their lack of wholeness. This always creates distance, and that's a wound. Again, a wound is a division. A wound is like, let's say you have my skin. A wound is where it gets cut. Now there's separation. So the wholeness of the person needs to have both positive and negative for self-circuitry. And this is often in childhood, when we are wounded, we have to deny it. And it was helpful in childhood to sabotage ourselves because we weren't able to thrive, or really our survival depended on it. It limits adult relationships, though. In childhood, it might be fine to keep pretending all these characters and wanting to always be the bigger one, and like we have to make sense of everything. We even have to be bigger than our parents. But as an adult, it's not necessary. There's a child in there still. So as an adult, there's room for the child. An adult who has a child has to be able to have an inner child first. So an adult who recognizes their needs and where they have a negatives or where they have lacks, and how it takes two to sort of complement each other and to be compatible, that's how one gets into consciousness of one's own dishonesty, one's own lack of self-respect, one's own fear of growth, one's own inner conflict, each one individually. What could be the bridge, and not trying to pretend to be perfect in someone else's eyes, hijacking their vision, but rather being seen as a whole person, as having challenges, having burdens, not being totally composed as if it's the time of death and everything is completed. This is not a lifestyle, that's a death style. So in order to be in a living relationship, in other words, how to be conscious while you're alive. While we're alive, we are flawed and defective and healing ourselves and learning and growing and getting past what we thought we knew. A year ago, we didn't know what we know now. If we were so busy saying now we know everything, but a year ago we thought we knew everything too, we're not growing, we're not living. Life has changed in this physical world, and we learn in Judaism that God wants a dwelling place in the lowest physical world. The parts of us that think that we're God already. That's where God wants to live, not where we are thinking we're God already. No, where we can allow God to come in and then we are godly. That's the breakthrough. The breakthrough is we come together. So obviously I just explained it with God, but we have to be able to do that with an other. So that's first inside and then outside. So come together, even if we're exhausted. Exhausted of fighting, exhausted of trying to prove, exhausted of thinking we need to pretend we know everything, exhausted of being afraid of uncertainty but pretending we have no fear, exhausted of trying to be the biggest one, always the best one, the smartest one, exhausted with all the fakeness, and actually being willing to just be real with the negative and the positive of the reality. And that's the only way to have a true child, right? Otherwise it's not really a child. We're still the child. We're actually turning a child into a parent. We're turning the relationship into the parent, but the relationship is a cause. We are a cause. The relationship is the effect of two people coming together. So if somebody is pretending that they're always the bigger person, then that person already, we could recognize, is still being the child. They're still stuck to a role. That's the way they think they're going to survive. That's a wound. They're cutting themselves in half. The version of them that could always be here and could be dealing with all wounds, dealing with all challenges, dealing with life. So this breakthrough is when we come together to take the relationship to the next level. This means there's a mutual dignity, mutual respect, a mutual commitment to healing and growth. Not to have the other one need to change or to be using the other one. It requires commitment. If we can't self-commit, we can't commit to another. If we don't have dignity to be still loving ourselves, even with our brokenness, even with our shame, then we cannot have dignity for another. If we cannot respect ourselves for showing up in life, we can't respect the other. So there's an intentional dialogue that has to happen. It's a solid, compassionate listening. After one expresses, even the other can try to repeat what they hear the other is saying. This is a practice. We can validate the other's reality, even if we don't agree. And if somebody's in the habit of always spit back disagreement, this person is clearly stuck in a wound. They cannot get out of their woundedness. Until they can admit that they're consciously aware of their wound, they cannot heal. So even if someone doesn't agree with us, it's okay to have differing opinions, but we still can allow for the other's reality to be valid. It's only repeating childhood woundedness to never allow someone else to have a different reality or see us even in a way we don't want to be seen. As long as we could see ourselves, it's not important how the other always sees us. Of course, we want to be seen positive in the other's eyes, but we're not even able to see the other with positive eyes the way we think we deserve. We can't even do that for the other if we're so busy worrying about being seen with positive eyes. That's a childish need. Both have to be mindful of the reactions, that these are from childhood patterns for safety. A person cannot get out of unsafe relating if they don't recognize that they need safety. That's why they're doing it. So all we're talking about here truly is a self-knowledge, awareness, accountability for our choices, a well-being, really. And one person's greatest need could be the other person's greatest defense. If I really need to be seen, it could be that you refuse, whoever you are, to see the way that I want to be seen. It could be that hurts you the most to have to see me that way. Maybe you want me to be not needing anything. And when I need, you feel like you have to shut it down. You can't need. That is the other person trying to defend themselves. They're saying, I can't be in a relationship where the other person needs. I don't feel I could provide. How could I be there? Let me just shut them down so they don't have any needs. But obviously that person is coming from a need that they can't provide. So there's techniques here, which is intentional dialogue and recognizing that we have to stretch our behavior, which is a gradually adjusting way to be capable of meeting not only our own needs, but someone else's needs. And then we could think about having positive, negative, enough meet together, birth a baby. But the only way through is through recognizing this is the potential of the relationship, not to try to make it seem like the actual is actually is higher than potential. We have to live in a state of still connecting to our potential, but also pulling back and saying, this is now, here and now. That's a teaching from Rabbi Nachman of Breslov, that we have to go forward and pull back. And that's the magnetism that allows for the actual and the potential to marry and have a baby, which is presence. Thank you. Bye.